Okay, welcome everybody. This is the Town of Andover Board of Finance meeting for Wednesday, July 24th, 2024. We'll go ahead and get started. I'll call the meeting to order at 7:02, looks like. We'll recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Okay, first agenda item is public speak. I know we have Shannon here with us. Doesn't look like anybody else. Shannon, do you have any comments before we, I know you want to add the tri-committee policy to the agenda. Is there anything else you wanted to address?
Not at this moment. Thanks very much.
Okay.
We have Linda too.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm used to seeing Linda's face in the corner, you know. Linda, do you have anything?
No, I just stay tuned every once in a while.
Got it. Glad to have you.
Mark, can I suggest you add levy schedule for AES?
Yeah. Well, we're not there yet.
We're not there. Yeah.
So. But yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
I thought you were already into changes.
We're going there next. So hearing nothing more, we'll go on to changes and additions to the agenda. As Eric suggested, one item that we should add to the agenda is the schedule for the levy for the school. So I guess I'm just going to go ahead and make that motion to add that as agenda item, which I guess would be 5F, which is the following the last item under new business. Do I have a second? Louise, okay. Any discussion? And just as a little context, this is the, we need to have a formal review and a policy about when the transfers are made to the school district. There's a little confusion over that with the treasurer, so we can discuss that and clarify it so that it's working to everyone's advantage. So. Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'll call a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. Okay, any other additions and changes to the agenda? I mean, Shannon had requested that we consider that tri-board committee. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think that should be on there.
Yeah.
So we should add. I'll move that we add that policy. It's really kind of old business, but we'll add it as new business, I guess.
No, well, I put it under old business. I mean, we already discussed. You guys discussed it already, right?
Yeah,
so,
we did.
Yeah, so I would just.
4C.
Yeah. Anybody want to second that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, Joanne, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? No. Okay, we'll go ahead and add that as item 4C then to the agenda. Any other additions or changes to the agenda? We have the transfers there. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think we have everything else that I want to address. No more? Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 4A, which is the review of budget to actual. Eric, we have this in our packet. I took a quick look at it. We've got some things that look like there's probably some big divergences, but they're probably just items that need to be caught up for the end of the fiscal year. School payments, for example.
Correct.
Yeah. And there was something else. Oh, the state trooper salary was another big one. I assume we have an invoice or paid that. Yeah.
So we have gotten the invoice. It did get paid. Unfortunately, they sent the bill to Sherry Holmes. And since she's dead, it would be hard for her to forward it to us. So we had to request it and we did get it. We have paid the bill. It's under the budgeted amount. So we're in good shape there. You know. We're trying to clear up kind of the last of the outstanding bills right now. We're pretty close. You know, and I'll be prepared to show you the what do you call it? The transfers
Transfers, yeah.
that Cheryl is proposing.
Yeah. Well, looks like we did a little better than expected on some of the property taxes. Tax revenue, right? So,
Yeah, in you know, those are always a guess, you know, in part because there's always a difference between when the grand list is published, which is by January 15th, and people come in with corrections and additions before the start of the fiscal year that it get included then. And then there's also supplemental, you know, there's a supplemental grand list for changes that occur during the year. So although we can predict the first, we can't really predict the latter.
and of course, we've got a lot more income than from interest than expected because of the stiff interest. So that put a lot of revenue in that wasn't originally budgeted for. So we're actually, from that standpoint, in very good shape. Any concerns, Eric?
No, not at this point. You know, I think we know we were under budget last year. And later we can talk about, I have a line item, you know, to talk about the error we found in the Excel spreadsheet that we found when we started putting the budget into QuickBooks. And we ended up with the two not matching. And Cheryl mostly, but she and I both spent a bunch of time trying to figure out why those two documents didn't match. And we eventually figured it out. And it was an error in the actual spreadsheet that we were using. Basically, it double counted a set of lines, which ended up with a fairly large difference, which will reduce the use of unexpended fund balance in last year. But we'll get to that when we get to it.
Yeah. Anybody have any other questions for Eric on the current budget versus actual?
No, I'll have questions later, Mark, like with the topic we were just discussing, but I'll wait till we get to it on the agenda.
Okay. All right, well, if there's no other questions, any questions on the check register? All right, hearing none, I guess we'll move on to new business. So 5A is the transfer of funds for the budget overages.
Wait, didn't we add 4C?
You did send that.
Didn't we add
previously.
4C, Mark?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you. So 4C is the, what's the exact?
Policy.
Tri-board policy.
The capital fund for
Regarding the capital
Fairground
fund,
School
tri-board
vacation.
policy regarding capital fund, okay.
So, you know, we talked about it at our last meeting. You weren't here, so, you know, we wanted to wait before taking any action, give people a chance to mull it over. We had to get the final version of it from Shannon. We've done that. You know, hopefully you've had a chance to at least look at it. And, you know, if people have questions, concerns, we should go over them. And if we're good with it, I think we should take action on it.
Have you forwarded that to the Board of Selectmen?
You know, I sort of had assumed it had gotten to them, but I did not forward it to the Board of Selectmen, no.
Are we doing it step by step? I'm not sure, Rob. We'll talk to Shannon in a minute if, you know, Mark will call her in, but
Yeah,
when
I
we
mean-
talked about it last meeting at length and went over it and put it up. I mean, maybe we can pull it up if Rob has it. It's pretty straightforward, I think, this time. And I think that it got past, I mean, you know, it's been reduced and it was, we went over it a lot. It was explained. I think the Board of Ed had already passed it, came up to us. So hopefully if Mark wants to pull it up or whatever, and then we just go over it real quick.
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
A lot of
yeah,
us
we
were
should-
in favor of it, I think, Rob. I mean, because, it's, since it's a new account and new oversight, it kind of protects everyone. Rob will speak to that, but we
Yeah.
thought good about it, but we wanted more of our board members to be present
Yeah.
before we
I'm good
officially
Yeah,
vote.
and Eric makes a good point. We probably should have gotten it over to the board of selectmen sooner, but worst comes to worst. If we're good with it, we can send it to them and say, hey, we recommend it. We've agreed to it. The Board of Ed likes it.
Mhm.
Please review and take action, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, oops. But yeah, we talked about last time, there have been
Don't
some.
feel bad. We didn't do anything. I think it was intended that way.
Okay, I hadn't really thought, I
Yeah,
honestly hadn't really thought
yeah.
about the process of the boards,
Yeah.
it's a stepwise process, or everybody looks at it at the same time. But anyway, I'm good with it, but I wanted, to see if anybody else had any issues or questions or thoughts, before I bring it a proposal that we vote on it.
Just to clarify, this proposed policy has not changed from the one that Shannon sent around. It's approved by the Board of Ed June 12th, 24. Is that correct? Okay. All right, just want to make sure I hadn't missed anything. So I was out of town for several weeks after that.
Can you send me a copy of that?
Yeah. Here, I've got it. I've got the email up. I'll forward it.
Is someone able to put it up and then if,
Yeah.
it's very easy to read through and
Yeah,
then
do you want to give me the right to share? I can pop it up. I have it in front of me.
any specific
Sure.
questions, right? The nice part about it while you're all figuring that out and getting it put up, I thought it allowed for a lot of fairness and having, if we want to call it the subcommittee, right, Rob, as far as having 2 members from each board. And then there were specific tiebreakers. It just really made a lot of sense, I think. Yeah.
Right, that was the big kind of breakthrough, is figuring out how, if we're gonna have 2 members of each board, I kind of have an ad hoc committee when necessary. Then you're gonna have a 6-person committee, and you have to figure out what happens if you have a 3-3 tie. And ultimately, the solution is that there are 3 boards. So if 2 out of the 3 boards, or all 3, agree on something, they can break the tie. So. But yeah, it's a much more streamlined, basic document. The idea is we're going to create a committee that, when there is a need for them to meet, they are the oversight for this, rather than trying to put everything in a neat little box in a policy document. We're going to kind of hopefully trust that board, or that commission, or whatever you want to call it, that committee, sorry, can do a good job of administering this thing.
Hey, Mark, can you make that full screen or enlarge that?
You want it to be
Well, it's very small
Larger?
right now. So
too small to read?
there,
Yeah,
if you made it
nice.
full screen.
Yeah,
Perfect.
it's in portrait mode on a larger monitor for me, so. Is that a little easier?
Oh, that looks good,
Getting
right?
easier and easier
I
by the
agree.
minute. Yeah,
Yeah.
every click seems to be better. Thank
I
you.
can read it now.
Yeah, and as a refresher, the name, the 35 School Road, that the idea behind that was just to make it clear that, it's capital fund for the buildings and grounds of AES, for which the BOE is responsible. So they thought that was a better name, just to make it clear that it encompasses building and grounds. I don't really care what it's called personally, but they liked that, and I'm good with it.
So first of all, I think that is too long a name in QuickBooks. I would have to check and see. I mean, we chose AES Capital Fund because it was short and it was easy to put in QuickBooks as a fund title. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying I don't know that for a fact. So that's A. Under B, So it looks like that you as the Board of Finance are giving up your authority to weigh in on AES budget surpluses, because you're giving them carte blanche to deposit into this fund. So they can deposit now 2% by state law into their own fund, and they can deposit everything else into this fund. Is that your intention, to give up your authority for that?
We put our trust in this committee. This is like our
But
start.
that's not the committee. You're allowing the Board of Education to do it. The Board of Education may choose to deposit money from its budget into the capital fund.
Mhm.
You're giving them permission to do that without any further oversight from the Board of Finance. Is that what you intended?
Let us sit on it for a minute. I want to just process it.
Okay.
Where the may choose to deposit money from its budget into. So. Understanding this, when I did a first run through, when it said they can choose to deposit money from its budget into the 35. Interesting, Eric, and thank you for bringing it up for conversation. You know, I'm speaking out loud. I think that I took it as possibly, in the budget season, we're going to have this capital fund for AES every year, or whatever we end up calling it. The Board of Selectmen, in our budget this year, there was 100,000 that was budgeted in that line. So I think when I did a first read through, I was thinking something different of that, and I'll sit back and let everybody.
Right, the 100,000, that's the town side.
Right,
From the
of
town
the
side.
budget.
This is addressing sort of the BOE side. And
Understood.
it reads, Eric's right, it reads the way it is currently drafted.
Right.
It reads that the BOE has the discretion to put the money in. The committee is oversight for, spending the money.
Mhm.
So, in the past, the procedure was BOE would ask Board of Finance to put money in. That was obviously something BOE would like the freedom to do themselves. So this is the draft. This is the way that it was redrafted. At this point, I want to get this
I guess I want to know which
going, and
money
so I
are
don't
we-
have
yeah.
strong feelings on it, but it's a fair point to bring up, and people should think about that before agreeing to it.
I thought that one of the things that $100,000 that we put into the budget was one of the things that was to kind of alleviate or offset the desire for the AES to be able to do that. I thought this was kind of to appease that situation. $100,000 was put in there, plus they can do the 2%. I thought that was kind of the idea of, and then we would be able to, as a Board of Finance, still have say in any leftover money at the end of the year and how and where it went, whether it was to go into the capital budget or back into the general budget or whatever. But I thought that was kind of the reason, and maybe Eric, you can remind me, isn't that why we kind of did that? Was we would put $100,000, we never used to do that. We never used to put $100,000 a year right into the budget for AES capital funds. This is a new fund. I thought that was kind of to offset or to alleviate some of that tension, if you will, about what happens to the money left over at the end of the year.
And it was,
So-
before Eric answers, I was thinking the unspent money at the end of the year. I would have no problem. I think in my mind, I was glad we established this and we're going to do baby steps. And then, like you said, Bill, and then I'll step back and just listen. I love the idea of having this, and it would not bother me if they had unspent money and they put it in a capital fund that was going to be used for the Board of Ed. I'm all in favor of that. I guess as I'm really dissecting the words, like, I don't know which money are we talking, because you're saying may also choose to deposit money from its budget into.
Unspent, surplus.
So the Andover Board of Ed may also choose to deposit money from its budget. So I took it as they might want to put a line item in their budget too. Is that, yeah, so I guess I need to hear a little bit about that.
This is leftovers at the end of the year. Basically the same
Okay,
kind of
that's-
idea, the 2%. But you know, now that I'm thinking about it, there's something that occurs to me and I hadn't, for whatever reason, hadn't really thought of before. I don't know if the school would ever want to do this, but I don't know if there's a mechanism through which they could decide to transfer money, not from their unspent budget but from their 2% fund if they thought that was necessary. And I don't know if that we want to have a line in there about that too. Because the 2%, I think, you know, is sort of a savings mechanism for them. But, you know, I guess in the past, when everything was kind of handled through their operating budget, you know, there was no issue there. Here, if you have money in a 2% lapsing and, you know, a big issue comes up, a capital issue, if they wanted to put some of that money that's in the 2% fund into the capital fund and use it for that purpose, is via this policy, it's sort of silent on whether they can do that.
Well, they
So,
could
I
just,
wonder
they
if
could
we
just
wanna-
choose not to fund the 2% fund and put it into here instead.
Right. Well, I'm thinking of depending on how built up the 2% fund is, right? The 2% fund is at the end of the year, correct me if I'm wrong, at the end of the year, they can put up to 2% of their operating budget into the fund. In theory, if you're not, I mean, in theory, that fund could build up, right? Is there a cap on it? Beyond, I mean, there's a cap on the load in, right? 2%. But if you load in 2% a couple of years in a row and, you know, for whatever reason, don't spend all that money, you could be building it up, right? I don't know if that's ever a thing that's actually happened though.
Well, there's 160 something $1,000, 165,000, I think, in that account now.
Right.
So to answer your question, Rob, the 2% non-lapsing account now is a lot more flexible than it was in the past. When the state law changed several years ago and it went from 1% to 2%, it also broadened the things they could expend that money for. So anything in the 2% non-lapsing account could be spent for any elementary school or education related capital project.
Mhm.
So they could absolutely, with the building owner's permission, so with the Board of Selectmen's permission, because they still can't do a capital project without the Board of Selectmen, but they could offer that up as part of the funding mechanism for a capital project if they so chose, right now.
Mhm.
So that shouldn't be affected by this, because we can easily fund something out of two different funds at the same time. We do that all the time for capital projects. Take some money from the steep account, finish the rest off with the building maintenance fund kind of thing. So that shouldn't be an issue.
Okay.
And it seems to me that adding any language around that would just kind of confuse things, make it a little more complicated than it probably needs to be.
I mean, and given Eric's explanation, you know, whatever I was
Yeah.
working my way towards there, it's not really a concern for me anymore. That's fine.
Okay.
If it's a simple matter of just mixing and matching from two different funds, and we do that all the time, you know, I hadn't really thought about it until just this moment, so it was a half-baked kind of a concern. So whatever, no big deal there. So yeah, it just comes back to the question about whether we're comfortable having it drafted this way, where BOE can just sort of make the call, or we feel the need to, you know, insert ourselves back into that, you know, the way it was before, where we had to give approval. Well, the way it used to be with with the 2% fund, right? With state law changed, so that's not a thing anymore. But it used to be that, you know, we'd have to sign off on it.
Well, no, that's not really true. Before you still didn't, they still have absolute authority over the money in the fund.
I know.
You've never had that as
In
a
the
board.
non-lapsing
That's not
account.
that's not what I was saying. I was saying that when they wanted to put money into it, didn't we usually
Right,
receive that proposal? That's what I'm talking about.
yes.
And so what I'm
used to be the
saying
case.
is, if people really want that mechanism to apply to this, then that would require a redraft, because the way it's written right now, it doesn't do that. I'm pretty agnostic about it, guys. So why don't y'all discuss and See
You know,
what-
I
Go ahead.
personally don't have a problem with it as it's written. I think that the money, you know, is allocated to the school. I think if this, you know, it's part of the school budget, the town votes on it. If at the end of the day, the Board of Ed decides they want to put some of it towards the capital fund, you know, if this becomes a year over year and they're, you know, putting $200,000-$300,000 in there,
Right,
then I think I would probably say we need to stop and rethink this because we're basically overfunding, or we just need to call the school budget, you know, say, hey, you know, it just seems to be that we're putting a couple $100,000 of every budget into this capital fund at the end of the year, and are the voters okay with that? You know, so that's really a different issue. I personally, I don't have much of a concern over this.
I agree,
I
Mark.
mean-
I think, oh, go ahead, Rob.
No, I just had one more thought, and this is probably 11th hour, so take it or leave it. But right now, correct me if I'm wrong, the school doesn't really, if they wanted to put in their budget right at the outset of the year, you know, $50,000 for the capital fund, could that be done? And would the policy as drafted be a problem if they wanted to do that?
I
This
was
is all
thinking about that. I don't
drafted as
really,
at the end of the year, we have money left over, we can put it into this, we can save it.
I don't know why that wouldn't be a possibility, why the mechanism couldn't be used if it really you know, people wanted to use to try to do that.
Well, see, I'm not sure I agree with that because the capital fund is held on the town side of the ledger. So the
Right.
town has to fund that if it's direct budgeted amounts, I would think.
Yeah, and I guess it doesn't make sense to do that on the schools because we do that on the town budget anyway already, right? We did that this year on the budget.
Right.
So why would we do that through the Board of Ed budget?
That's where I was
Right.
getting confused with rereading it
Yeah.
too deep.
Yeah.
And I agree with Bill. I mean,
Okay.
what he brought up with why we started this fund, why we wanted to have it available, you know, it was in good faith that you know, the town, I think, funded it higher than I thought we were going to. So that's really good. It gave them a good start. So I'm in
What-
favor of this. If this was, I mean, this I have no problem with. If it was money that was allocated to the Board of Ed, and then at the end of the year, there's unspent funds and they want to funnel them into that, I have no problem with them making the decision to do that. In fact, I would probably be in favor because we've unearthed quite a few projects that are coming up. So, I mean, that was the whole purpose, exactly what Bill said, was we wanted to get this going and hoping that unspent money would go there. But I would be concerned, and I think other town, you know, if there's a big surplus every year, but we'll take that year by year. Yeah, that's my 2 cents. I'm in favor. I don't have a problem with it.
Hey, Eric, did you get the email I sent you? With
I
with a
haven't.
copy of this?
I'm just gonna
No,
go ahead and
look-
roll on to the next section if everybody's okay with that. So just reading this, each of the Board of Ed, Board of Finance, and Board of Selectmen should select 2 members from the board to serve on a committee. 6 total, should determine how the money shall be spent. All money shall be spent on capital projects for 35 School Road. All capital projects at 35 School Road should be managed by a tri-board committee. Board of Ed will submit requests for expenditures to the committee.
So if you go back up to item A, that says explicitly that the money in that fund can only be spent on 35 School Road. Yet the charter gives you as a Board of Finance the ability in an emergency situation to take money from any capital fund or any unspent funds that the town has and uses it to deal with an emergency. So I don't think that's consistent with this policy. I think you would want the town's attorney to weigh in on whether you can even agree to that, because that seems to contradict the charter. I think, but I am not the town's attorney. You're on mute, Joanne.
Last meeting, we did have Shannon pipe in. I know she has the legal side and might have something to share with us on that. And I appreciate Eric's opinion, but since we're discussing it in full, should we invite Shannon to address what Eric just said? If she sees the charter being,
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I think honestly, I'd have to go back and look at the charter, and I'm a layman, but I think Eric's right. But I think almost by default, the charter is going to supersede if there's something here that's deemed to be in conflict with the charter. The charter would probably prevail, but you know, if such a thing were to need to happen, is Shannon still on? So yeah, okay. I don't know, Shannon, if you have any input on
No,
that.
I agree with you, Mark. I think two things. Number one, if that's a concern, we could certainly add it to the policy. If that's a concern, we can add that caveat on there. I understand it's in the town's ledger, so that would be available to the town to do that. And then the second thing is the charter's in the process of being revised. It hasn't yet been passed by the Board of Selectmen, so if it's something that needs to be addressed, it could also be brought to the attention of the Board of Selectmen during the charter revision public hearing next Thursday.
Mark, can you scroll down just a little bit? So
Yeah, I'd like to kind of keep.
just want to see that. I wanted to read D, just, okay.
Bill,
So-
Bill,
Deed
you got
under
a
it, yeah,
copy,
deed's the under
you
it.
got a copy of this, Bill, in your emails.
Yeah, I know I do, but I'm reading it right here, right now.
I just wanted to make sure you got it.
I got 4 things open and I'm just trying to look at this one here, but thank you.
Right, so under duties of the Board of Finance, if a supplemental appropriation is needed, which is how an emergency appropriation would be, blah, blah, blah. If you go down to source of funding, it says funding for supplemental appropriations may be provided from the following sources. Transfer from any available fund balance. So the charter pretty clearly says you as a commission have the authority to raid any fund in an emergency situation. So I don't think you should be signing something, an agreement that goes against that. But I'm also not a voting member, so, but that's my take.
Is that something we can add to this document? I guess I'm talking to Shannon and to Rob. Is that something that would be agreeable?
My gut reaction is that, I mean, if we feel that that's a concern, then we could probably add a single sentence to say that, you know, notwithstanding the foregoing, nothing in this provision shall supersede the town charter, or, you know, if there's
Yeah.
a conflict with the town charter prevails. We could just put that in there. I mean, it's probably true anyway, but if we wanted to just put it in a single sentence saying, you know, nothing in this policy, you know,
Supersedes.
could invalidate the charter. So, you know, we could add it, it could be a single sentence, I think. I think, you know, to the extent that we're thinking of this as more of a statement of intent, you know, under normal operating procedure, this is how we do it. But, you know, in extremis, if there's some sort of event, then we would have that out. So yeah, maybe a single sentence along those lines.
I think that would be
But if-
required.
you know, if we do revise it that way, I'm assuming that, you know, BOE would need to repass it,
Oh, right.
you know, at their next meeting or what have you. But yeah, I think it's a fairly straightforward. I just have to think about exactly how I'd phrase it, but something along the lines of what I said, you know, notwithstanding the above,
Yeah,
you
The
know,
charter
nothing,
takes precedent.
nothing in A supersedes the town charter.
I think that would probably be satisfactory to most people. I don't know if Shannon wants to weigh in on that, but
So that sounds fine. I think two things. Number one, we wanted to go board by board. So maybe the other thing to do would be, I could add that into the current policy. If you pass it, the next thing would be to get it to the Board of Selectmen for their consideration. They meet before the Board of Education meets in August. So depending upon any further changes that they might want to see made, then we could, as a Board of Ed, consider that in our August meeting. Thanks.
I agree with all of you. I think we also said that there's no way with this being the olive branch and trying the baby step thing that it would be hard pressed for us unless it's a major catastrophe, urgent, horrible thing happens in town that we're going to touch this fund. But
Exactly.
like Eric said, if it's gonna make everyone feel better and, you know, to put that in order to get it passed, then I'm fine with adding that line, but.
I don't think it's wrong to add, I think it can only help to add that language just to make it explicit so that, people are clear on it, and honestly, if the policy, if the charter were to change, and, Shannon was right to bring that up. If the charter were to change, we would have, and there would be some conflict with this particular policy or any policy that we have, the charter is going to prevail. So it probably makes sense to have it in there. I'm good with this, I think, as it is.
Yeah.
With that caveat added.
With that cap, yeah, with that one line.
Yeah, you're also gonna run afoul of section 807 in the charter, which states that the Board of Finance, in consultation with CIP and the Board of Selectmen, shall maintain the written purchasing policies and oversee purchase requests. Although that
CIP
does,
is not really considered in this, are they?
right, but the charter calls out that as a CIP responsibility. So now you're saying for 1/3 of so some things are already carved out for the local Board of Education regarding CIP. The question in the thing that's unclear in 807 is, does that include capital projects? And that's not, I wouldn't want to weigh in on that as to what the legalities of that. You would have to, that would be a consultation from the town's attorney. What he felt that we thought of that.
Yeah, I mean, I always approaching it where the BOE was carved out, but yeah.
It says right in the
BOE.
very first section of 807, except the local Board of Education. So
Right,
the very first paragraph says that the Board of Education is excluded, Eric.
Yeah.
right. But the Board of Education doesn't own the building and doesn't own the grounds. And doesn't have the authority to do capital projects anyway, technically, without the approval of the Board of Selectmen. So that's always been, and I do agree that the charter is very unclear there. That's why I'm saying I would not weigh in on that either way. I disagree with your interpretation, but I don't know that I'm correct, and I'm not an attorney.
Well, I disagree with your interpretation that the Board of Education has to have the Board of Selectmen sign off on every capital project. But the whole purpose of this creation of this tri-board committee is to try to create some harmony among all three boards. And instead of us having a jurisdictional continuing fight between who has what authority, to have all three boards come together as we've been trying to do, to have a tri-board committee, have oversight over capital projects. That's the whole purpose of this thing. So.
Right, and I just personally think it's kind of dumb to have two different organizations that oversee capital projects.
But
Which
who
is
else
what you have
oversees
there.
capital projects, Eric? I'm on CIP. We don't have any authority to oversee the capital project, so it's not duplicative.
Right, you refer to the appropriate board.
Correct. So it's
Right.
not duplicative.
Right, yep.
Okay, so I guess what I'm hearing is it sounds like a lot of the board members are in favor of this. I'm not hearing anything that lead me to think otherwise, but that there is a desire to have the caveat language put in that the charter would prevail in the event of a conflict.
Rob just threw something up there that looked pretty good, right?
Yeah, I just threw out you know, my draft edition, that one sentence I was talking about, I wanted to put it down instead of just saying it out loud.
Yeah,
You know, if anybody has a better idea, it's great. But you know, ideally what we would do is we amend it and pass this and send it on for review and consideration to BOS.
yep.
So are you proposing that we make a motion to approve this along with the addition of a clause that indicates that the charter would prevail in the event of a conflict?
Yes, and I don't know if we just, you know, say, you know, this is section E, notwithstanding the foregoing, nothing in this policy shall supersede the town charter. Period.
Or
Simple.
similar language, yeah.
So is my assumption by this that the tri-board committee is going to be the one responsible for coming up with RFPs, coming up with the purchasing policy for those RFPs, and managing the projects, overseeing the projects? Is that the intention of this? Because that's kind of what it looks like from me.
I didn't take it that way. I took it that it was just, that was a tribe, and I could be wrong
Well,
here.
it explicitly says right at the top of the screen though, Bill, all capital projects at 35 School Road shall be managed by the tri-board committee.
Okay,
yeah.
managed.
That's
Okay,
pretty clear
managed.
language.
Yep, all right, you're right.
So,
You're
I mean,
right.
that's easy from my perspective because that absolves me of any responsibility for any capital project. And for that matter, it absolves the superintendent. It says that tri-board is going to manage that project. So who is your representative on the Board of
Perhaps
Finance?
managed is the
that's
wrong,
going to run the
clearly, Eric,
project?
good point. You're
That's a good point. I don't like
spot
that
on. Like,
language.
I know I go back and
That,
forth.
I
with you a
assume
lot,
that,
but-
that committee is gonna need help with something like an RFP. Yes. That's a good
Well,
point.
you could state that to manage the project means to select a project manager who will then assume responsibility, and that could be somebody in the school, it could be
Or-
somebody in the town, it could be a third party, right? So you could argue that, but it's pretty clear in this policy that they are responsible for that. It doesn't automatically fall to the school district, and it doesn't automatically fall to the town or CIP or anyone else. So it's.
Yeah,
you know,
I think the idea is oversight more than nitty gritty management. And so maybe there, we could,
But
change our
Eric
words a
does
little bit.
raise a good question that
Absolutely.
capital
yeah.
projects are not,
Yes.
they're pretty involved, right? So somebody needs to manage it,
Mark,
start
sorry
to
to jump.
finish.
I think I was in, and I should have gotten a lot deeper in it, so it is great that Eric is here. We got Shannon side the last time. I was thinking this committee was going to get together as far as selecting what needed to be done, maybe, you know, prioritizing, Shannon.
That's,
And so, you know, these terms are, it's good that Eric, you know, manage means managing, and that's a lot. Like in our school system, we have the buildings and grounds. It's a heck of a lot bigger, but there's a lot that goes into it. You know, you may let people in your school building or show someone to where the work site's gonna be in the building if they're working on a bathroom or something, but managing the work, inspecting the work, all of that. So that word managed probably needs to be changed. So again, in the heart of trying to do something really good for the town, and I believe in this, the word managed is a little much for what I was thinking. I was thinking suggestions are gonna be made, they're going to be brought forward. So
that,
yeah.
that's the way I understood it, and I was remiss in the beginning of that too. I agree with Joanne. I
Yeah.
thought the tri-board was going to agree on the capital projects that were going to be funded, and then it would go to the normal, whatever normal is,
Channels, yeah.
channels to manage and run these projects. So that I missed that at the beginning. This is obviously getting a little bit more legalistic than I think we all really thought at first, but manage is a too strong of a word for me, to tell you the truth, because it does.
May I make a comment?
Yep, go ahead, Louise,
yes.
sorry, just waiting for, I saw your hand up, I was waiting for, great, yeah.
I think with all this misinterpretation, I really feel the town attorney should be looking at this
I do too.
and giving his okay on it. Because Eric makes a really good point.
Mhm.
And who wants to be on a committee if that responsibility is going to be on them? Sorry, Eric.
I think I saw this committee as functioning kind of like kind of an ad hoc CIP for this particular
Yeah.
purpose.
Me too.
So if we need to specify that, you know, we're talking about oversight really more than management. And then I guess, do we have to explicitly spell out that the tri-board committee can designate a project manager or something along those lines as they see fit for such projects?
Can I just input that the easiest way is just to change the word managed?
Say that again, Shannon.
Say that again,
Probably the
Shannon.
easiest way is just to change the word managed, if that's
To-
what people are having a trouble with. So
What's the
instead of the fact that it's going to be managed by the tri-board committee, we could put in something like overseeing or something like that. As Robert just said, the whole intent of this thing is for the tri-board committee to agree upon what capital projects are going to be done
Good.
and then not undertake the management of the project as a project manager would do.
Right.
So again, it's trying to be cooperative among all three boards. So if it's better to put in a different word than managed, I'm getting in legalese as well, but I understand that manage is a strong word.
Mhm.
So
Has the town attorney seen this yet?
no, not that I'm aware of, but I would imagine that somebody has passed it along to him.
Mhm. I would like this committee to be, like you said, the decider, kind of, they will get together as a committee. The Board of Ed would bring to the forefront the items that they may want to consider. You know, we also know, you know, and then hopefully with the three boards talking together, they will present why, you know, this is needed first, second, third, you know, safety, it's gonna blow or something, you know, things like that. And then, I mean, we do have a very capable town, so as far as managing, and we pay all the people, and I think we put in money to have some kind of project person be in the office too, to assist Eric, so I would like all the projects to go that row, you know, that way. So however, I don't know how everyone feels, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds, because I certainly don't work there.
Well,
But I
you,
would like this to be just a
know,
decision maker.
oh, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, John. I would
Yeah,
say
just
that if you
presenting
change
the-
the word
Mhm.
managed by the word authorized, it kind of fits what everyone's talking about.
There you go.
Or you could just
Authorized,
eliminate,
okay.
you could just eliminate B. It's almost redundant. You can almost just get rid of it.
Yeah, I was thinking of that too. Because they
'cause you
shall
need the
determine
fact
how the
that-
money will be spent.
It's in the
Exactly.
first part, though.
Or you could just add to A, shall
Yeah.
be, how determine how the money shall be spent on capital projects, comma, and oversee, and serve as oversight for said projects or something like that. If we want to just sort of put a belt and suspender on it, but I'm not, you're right. I think B could probably just go.
Yeah, oversight is scary too, because oversight means you know, I feel like that's a little bit responsible too. Like, are you coordinating the workers to come in? Are you know, like.
Well,
what we said.
somebody's gonna have to do it, so it may fall to the Board of Selectmen, because it's technically a town capital
Well, I would think
project.
we have town people that are paid salaries to do work or whatever. It's not gonna be ongoing projects all the time, but.
Yeah. The other thing is, I mean, I guess what I would say is, I mean, I have to admit, yeah, I hadn't thought
Yeah,
about
no
who was
problem.
going to do the project management. I guess I sort of assumed it would be ultimately put through the town. But I guess what I would say is, you know, the last time AES had to do a capital project, you know, something that strikes us as capital, because obviously there was no mechanism like this before, you know, who managed it? How was that done in the past? You know, obviously you have to have somebody be able to work with the contractor and, you know, make sure that everything's on the up and up and get the permitting done and all that. So
Mhm.
surely we've done something in the past, and we could try and make sure that this allows for that. But yeah, I mean, my gut is that the actual simplest thing to do here is remove B. Because managed that, now that you bring it up, managed is a bad word to be putting on this tri-board committee. It's not going to have the expertise necessary.
Right.
Rob, just to answer your question, I've been on the Board of Ed now for 9 years. The last major project that we did which I guess arguably could have been considered a capital project, but it didn't bring about all of this problem, was to put a new roof on the school. And for that project, we formed a subcommittee. And the subcommittee consisted of members of the Board of Ed, members from the town, members who had engineering expertise and whatnot. So that's how it was done. That's how
Yes.
we foresaw future capital projects being done. But then the whole situation happened last year with the driveway project. So this is what we've come to. And
Got
I
it.
love the word authorized. That's an excellent suggestion, Mark.
So Shannon, I guess I just want to ask one more thing, because this is for my knowledge. I was trying to protect the Board of Ed from having to do all of that, but it kind of sounds like they did not mind having a subcommittee to have to do all of that.
Well, I'm sure they at least want to have,
As far as checking on the workers or doing this or being responsible. So, all right, I'll sit back and listen. Understood how this is gonna go.
Mark, I just have one further question. Is that, would these projects be subject to the town Board of Finance's purchasing policy?
I don't even know if we're that far yet.
Fair question.
yeah, it's a fair question. Yeah,
What is the status of our purchasing policy at this point? When's the last time we looked at that?
it's been a while.
I think we passed it and
Oh.
we lowered the max, I think, and one time I'd have to draw it back up in the emails, but we did finally pass it.
Within the last 2 years was
Mhm.
your last major revision.
Yeah.
And it's the policy the town is running under now, certainly.
What is the amount that has to,
Triggers an RFP.
yeah, sorry, yeah.
Was it like 25 or?
15,000.
15, that's what I was
15.
gonna say.
Caveats.
We lowered it to 15 at that last time, but we said we could circle back if we needed to, and we haven't needed to yet.
Yeah, I think we need to revisit the policy based on this this joint policy. Make sure that we're not in conflict and that they're somehow in some way compatible.
I mean, this policy right now is silent on that. So it's not, again, Eric raises it because this doesn't specifically say anything about a spending policy, and doesn't, it would you'd either have to bake something into this directly or simply make reference to the town side policy. Or exempt it if you wanted to go that route, but right now it's silent.
I think we need to revisit it if we're going to approve this, just to make sure we're not in conflict. And that's not a problem. I think we should revisit that policy every year anyway, and just make sure it's working and we don't, foresee the need for any changes.
Yeah, I mean, the costs go up, do we still feel that that's the right threshold, for instance, just as an example? We should be
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
periodically checking in on that.
If it's putting any burden on the town employees, we want to understand that, and yeah, okay. So folks, I'm not sure where we land here, if we want to, hand this back to Rob and Shannon to kind of make those minor proposed changes and then see where it goes with, with the other boards and the Board of Finance, whether you want to try to authorize this based on, expected wording changes, or we table it till the next meeting when we have some revised language.
I would be in favor of having Shannon and Rob just kind of make those changes in here so we can look at it one more time, and maybe even, like we talked about, Mark, send it by the town attorney, just to make sure it's,
Can always get the opinion
and
and find
maybe-
out what he thinks.
yeah.
At this
So
I think we should
point,
definitely
yeah.
table it
in
till next month.
in terms of redrafting, I mean, I think we have, two issues we kind of fleshed out. The one that's still sort of hanging there is indeed the purchasing policy question. I don't, am I hearing from the board that that you all generally think that we should make reference to that in this document?
No, I wouldn't.
You wouldn't?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, I think we want to make sure that we're compatible. But that there's nothing that prohibits, that it's compatible, that they can both exist side by side, not in conflict. At least at this point, until we go back to revisit the policy. But it sounds like everyone's in favor of this general process for this particular fund.
Yeah, and
So
I guess the last question would be, Eric, you brought up the just a kind of as a potential difficulty, the length of the name of the thing. Can you circle back to us on that at some point, and just let us know what the character limit is?
Yeah, it may not be a problem, but I remember at one point we were having to truncate the names in the fund because we didn't have that many characters, but I don't know what that limits are. And we had some with pretty long names.
Okay, let's just figure that out. If we have to take road and make it RD or something, to make it fit, just let us know. Okay, so we take one more pass at it. I don't know if, Shannon, you think maybe it might make sense for us, even though the Board of Finance isn't going to take action on it tonight. We had a pretty good discussion, and whether we might want to start the Board of Selectmen looking at it anyway, or if you think we should hold and wait. I'm sort of, again, I could go either way here. Board of Finance is, I think, looking at this pretty favorably. We just want to tighten a couple things up that Eric's raised as good questions.
You guys can talk about that offline too, but we could, and Lord knows I don't want to set up any more meetings than we have to, but we could always, if there was some urgency behind this, we could pull together a special meeting if we can get a quorum, since I don't think this is going to be particularly controversial once we get the language up.
Yeah, I guess my only thought is, when do we really need to get this thing nailed down such that, that bathroom project can move ahead? Because that's the big one, right? That's the one that's staring us in the face.
We're okay for now. I think you're going to address it later on in your.
Oop, we just lost you. You muted. You muted, Shannon. I don't know what happened.
I didn't mute her.
I did. Real quickly. Thank you. Very quickly. Rob and I, why don't we finalize the language, pass it along to the Board of Selectmen for their input, and then hopefully next month, all three boards can finalize the policy.
Okay, when you send it to the board, please CC me so I can CC Dennis O'Brien, the town.
Oh, yes, I meant to, after Rob and I do the policy, I would send it on to the town attorney before sending it to the Board of Selectmen.
Okay,
And I'll CC you, Eric. Sorry about that. Yep.
not a problem.
Okay, so it sounds like we're not going to have a motion on this tonight then. Some good discussion. Thanks, everybody. If nobody has any objections, we'll move on to the next next agenda item.
Yep.
Okay, that is the education mandate relief legislative wrap-up.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
So
It's
the transfer of funds.
first.
We have some leftover money, right? That's what,
5A, transfer of funds.
Okay, let me.
these are all
pull that
surpluses,
back
right,
up.
Eric?
So we, as the treasurer discussed with you last month, in agreement with the auditor felt that we didn't need to make inter-budget transfers. We just needed to make each budget, 0 or greater. So these are all the budgets that the town ran a deficit in.
Excuse me, Eric, are you able to make that a little bigger like they did the last time, or?
Maybe.
Yeah, just hit the plus sign in the bottom right. You can also collapse that menu bar on the left. But I think hit the plus item on the bottom right, you'll get where you need to go.
If not, I'll sit closer.
We have, if not, it's in our emails, Joanne,
Oh, no, I got it. I was on the email around 4. We got it about 4 this afternoon. I did see it.
Yes.
Thank you. I know. I'm trying to just see it here. Thank you.
Yep. So basically, we're in the black. We're not overspent overall in the budget by any means. These are just, instead of doing, 75 of these and transferring, evening off each budget line item, what we're doing is just, making each department whole.
Whole.
essentially. So
Eric,
these,
all of these were within the department, as we talked about, so,
no, these are transfers between departments.
got it.
These
All
are
right, I'm looking at
departments
that
that are
too.
over.
Okay.
And
And usually we get where it's, so maybe that's at the bottom, like, okay, so you're transferring this and then we see where you're making the adjustment then.
so
There
these
you
are
go.
the ones that are, the money will come from.
Got it.
My admin
There you
assistant
go.
line
I
item,
didn't go there.
town clerk, elections benefits.
I move we approve the requested budget transfers as set forth in the fiscal year transfer request number 1 document.
I'll second.
Bill seconds, okay. Do we have any discussion?
I do have a question. Eric,
Yep.
can you scroll up to the top
Further?
a little bit? Yep, keep going, keep going. So I noticed a lot of them were salaries. So was this overtime or, again, I know we have the money to cover it, but is that how we went over on that?
So.
Since
the
we
town-
budget for salaries,
So the biggest one over is the town planner. So when we budgeted for the town planner, we assumed that we were going to take roughly 2/3 of his total salary from the town planner line item
Mhm.
and $8,000 of that from the old capital fund that is there for the plan of conservation and development. Because we're essentially using the town planner to develop the plan.
Mhm.
But by because we have enough of a surplus that it doesn't matter, by funding this, that means we can go 1 year before the town has to pay the full freight of the town planner's wages. Because next year, that means we can cover his salary again. Like in this budget, his salary will be covered again, 2/3 by wages, by the town planner wages line item, 1/3 by the old capital fund. This means next year we don't have to see a budget increase to see his full wages because we've been able to cover that. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So it
Yeah,
allows us to kick the can and not pass the wage increase onto the public for one more fiscal year.
Mhm. I remember when he came on board, there was certain things that we're doing. Okay, yeah, I just had that quick question. I'm good. I know we can move on if that's my discussion, please. Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody have any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, call for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item, which is 5B, education mandate relief, legislative wrap-up.
Okay. Hang on. So, my understanding was that you wanted to talk about that further in this budget. That was the thing that I asked Cheryl to bring up with you last time, which was the requirement or the change in regulation that now automatically gives the Board of Education the opportunity to put 2% of any unexpended funds in their 2% non-lapsing account. Relative to,
We got that part, Eric. We didn't go over, I know we had a lot of information in our last, month's packet. So we said we were just gonna look it over and we didn't need to hear about all of it, but if there was anything key that you thought you should tell us as a board, we were just pushing that off. We understood the lapsing, they can put it in and they don't need permission. That was easy. We had the one piece document. So I don't know, yeah, if there was it was pretty self-explanatory. We just were gonna wait for you to come back if you had anything big you needed to share with us.
No, I don't think,
Mhm.
There are some things that are still potentially very problematic within the last couple of years of legislation that may have a significant negative effect. It's still kind of unclear. One of the things that's been kind of scary for towns is that, although we're not seeing it yet in our KERMA bill, the state of Connecticut basically made the presumption that any firefighter, including volunteer firefighter, that got any form of cancer, it would be considered a work-related, and therefore KERMA would be on the hook for, workers' comp to cover that individual. So, and they set up a fund to pay for that at the state level, but they're not putting a whole lot of money in it. They only put money into it once. So at some point, that's something that's likely to bite all the towns. And you can argue that firefighters do have an increased risk of certain types of cancer. Absolutely no question about that. But it was kind of a blanket statement. And that may have ramifications in the future. So that's one of them. The legislature certainly refused to tackle anything in terms of changing the prevailing wage thresholds for public works projects, which is something the legislature really needs to tackle because it's been like 18 years since they've adjusted the wage thresholds for renovation. But, unfortunately, right now there's and I spoke directly with the chair of both parties, in the Senate, and neither of them have any intention of broaching that. In fact, it came pretty close to making through something new this year, which would have said any utility work is automatically prevailing wage, no matter how big or how small. And based on the definition the state has, any electrical run, any conduit run between building, any fiber run, any of that would have automatically been a prevailing wage, job forevermore if that had passed, no matter how expensive or inexpensive it was. I mean, certainly that would have had a negative impact to us financially. Other than that, I don't have a lot from this legislative session that had direct financial impacts. We're still waiting to see what the legislature is going to end up doing. The other thing that potentially can affect us is if they really do start changing the regulations regarding affordable houses and requiring towns to invest in affordable housing. That would definitely be an expense the town would have to deal with. The other thing that we just found out the last week that we kind of made the cut, fortunately, is I had submitted a grant for additional ARPA funding for the community center for about $9,000 to furnish parts of the community center. And I had been waiting because I had plenty of time before the grant deadline submission. So I was going to submit it fairly late, install the project. So we had a CO before we started requesting it. But then the legislature decided to defund that whole project. But I had the application ready to go. So I just submitted it as soon as there were rumors that they were going to defund it. And so our submission was in time. And basically, if I'd submitted it 2 weeks later, they just wouldn't have funded it. because they cut about a third of the money from the project. But that shouldn't affect us. We should get the money for that. The other thing that is positive is I did submit for a congressional appropriation through Senator Murphy's office. And we did make it into the appropriation bill, which is the very first step in the legislative process and actually getting the money. But at least we've cleared the first two hurdles, which is we submitted a grant that was technically correct. It made it through the reviewing agency, which was the, I think, Department of Agriculture, and the Appropriations Committee put it in the appropriation funding bill. Still have to go through the legislature, still going to be 3-4 months at best before we know whether it's funded. But if we get that, that would give us about $310,000 that we will spend towards completion of the community center and installing the backup generator to cover all 3 buildings. And then we're on the hook for 25% of that. So we would spend about $100,000, but we would spend that $100,000 that we've already earmarked for the community center anyway. So we're not spending any money we already haven't designated for that exact project. We're just hopefully adding $310,000 in federal funding to that. So,
Awesome.
you know, in terms of legislative stuff, that's pretty much all I got at this
And
point.
we all leafed through it, but no, that's perfect. Thank you, Eric.
Yep.
Great job.
Okay, if we have no other questions, we can move on to item 4C, which is the town match for the Deep Trails Grant.
Okay, I don't know whether I've announced to the Board of Finance yet or not. We were successful finally in getting a DEP rec trails grant. I got the award letter in the beginning of June. That does require a town match. So it is basically a grant to design a multi-use pathway that goes from the town hall to the rail trail through the town's property behind the town hall. So the grant award is for $83,500. The town has to contribute $21,000. I am proposing that we take that from the multi-use building fund. And fortunately, we added 50,000 to that this year. So we have the capacity to do that with that grant. And then my intention, if we, once we've completed the design, which should be fairly easy because we already had an RFP to select the contractor that was doing all the design work for both paths. So we shouldn't have to go back to RFP because we already have a project estimate that matches the grant total. So that does have to go to town meeting. The Board of Selectmen is scheduling a town meeting August 1st. I asked them to do that because they were holding a public meeting or a public hearing anyway on their on the charter revision stuff. And I thought by doing that, you're likely to get a bigger turnout and have people weigh in on both things. So, and the Board of Selectmen can't technically sign what they need to sign for the state because the charter requires public approval for that project, but because it requires a town match. So that's that. I'm just informing you at this point that that is going to go to town meeting. And I would hope you would all come out to town meeting and weigh in on it.
Go ahead.
What is the total cost of this project? I know this is a secondary trail that'll go behind the schools and then link up with the big project. So not to talk, I know it's been a long meeting already, but not to ask a lot about this particular thing, but the total cost of this project?
I think it's 104,000.
Yeah,
Mhm.
if my math's right, if I'm doing the math right, it's just a hair over, right? 104,375. If it's a 20% match, and you're saying the
Oh, right.
match,
Of his
and
Right,
so
8,000
so
and his 21, yeah.
right, and if
But I
if I
didn't
do a
know
little
if-
math, and it's just shy of 105, yeah, it's 104,375 if my math is right, but it's right around there.
Yeah,
And
Eric, this is just a connector to the bigger project going on 316, or is it Percy Cook all the way down to the rail trail?
so this goes all the way down to the rail trail.
Yeah, okay.
Really what this does is makes it a loop trail. And that is one of the reasons why we got the other grant, among other things, is that we proposed it as phase one of something that would provide, because that's something that, everybody seems to really like to fund things that create existing loops. So this would allow a loop that goes from the town hall, runs down School Road, runs down 316 on a pathway there, jumps on the Hop River Rail Trail, heads towards Willimantic on the Hop River Rail Trail, goes back onto the secondary path and loops back to the town hall, resulting in about a 2.5-mile loop.
By a very steep section, which a lot of people don't like, but maybe the design will end up with some switchbacks, so.
Well, that's exactly why.
I'll consider volunteering for the oversight committee on this one. I hike down all the time with my dogs.
Yeah, no doubt.
I mean, I like the steepness because it's one of the few places around here you can get any elevation, but anyway.
Come walk Bear Swamp Road sometime. It's pretty steep.
I know, right? Yeah. I feel it.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
that's just information at this
Yep.
point. Okay,
Good.
thanks,
Thank
Eric.
you.
Right.
Well, if there's no further questions on that, and I don't want to cut anybody off, but I guess Joanne noted we're running pretty long. So the next agenda item we have is 5D, which is the error in the budget sheet. Eric, I don't know if you want to pull that up or you want me to, but.
Yep, I can pull that up.
Mark, can I ask you, I mean, while we're waiting for him to pull up, did anyone see my email question? Was I correct in asking that it was like a $40,000 error when I was looking at the lines?
I didn't look at the actual line,
Okay.
but yeah, you
I
talked
didn't
to
get a
Eric
response
briefly
to my-
about it.
Yeah, so we'll
Yeah, I
wait.
think technically it's a $41,000 error.
No, I didn't wanna, I knew, okay.
Right, yep,
So I was,
Absolutely.
I mean, I know spreadsheets well.
yep,
So we passed a budget that was $40,000 higher than it needed to be.
Because of that spreadsheet
Because-
error.
correct.
And I mean, I'm just calling it what it is.
I'm
Yeah,
total
Correct.
three
it's a
on
big,
line.
it's a big error. I mean,
It's
especially
just
in a year
50,
when
not
we had so much
250.
of a spending increase. I understand your thought. Sorry, Mark, that I kind of took over, but I know it's been a.
No, it's fine. I don't have anything to add. I mean, it kind of is
Yeah,
what it is.
because,
So.
when we added so much spending this year and, everybody was in favor of the
I was
different
gonna put
things
this up on
coming.
it, but I didn't use it.
And then yes, we won't be taking so much from the surplus or whatever you said, but my intent is we could have saved the taxpayers the 40,000. So I'm sorry to get on this negative, but it has to be said. We upped the spending a lot in this budget. So to have this big of an error kind of breaks my heart a little, but I'll sit back.
So
Yeah, unfortunately, I
essentially
think
what
there's
we're gonna do
probably
here
not much we
Okay.
can do with it, other than make note of it, and if we so choose, just, take this into account, we develop the budget for next year.
yeah, obviously we don't want to make mistakes like that. So the idea here is basically we're just going to draw down less from our fund balance, which, in turn is good for the town because we were actually finally making interest on that stuff. So that's pretty nice. In a sense, hopefully it does ultimately net out in taxpayers' favor. But yeah, oops, that's an error and it's unfortunate.
And I did
Better than the
only
opposite
that
type
because
error.
I did ask the question when we were passing it, if the spreadsheets were checked and double checked, and yeah, it's not, everybody makes mistakes in their jobs or whatever happens, but it just, like you said, like Mark said, take note, I will be checking all those cells in the, cause you want to go back and check what adds up and what feeds into the other. So I definitely remember making sure before we passed it to ask, has this been, confirmed? Yeah, that's all. I mean, there's nothing, and I don't like to keep going on and on. I wish it was like $40 and not 40,000, so.
Me too. You know.
Especially because I was fighting to take little things off here and there, and I understand we passed this budget and maybe that's why I feel more strongly about, yeah, it's okay. I'm gonna stop, but it's 40,000 is a lot when we up the budget so much this year. The spending.
Right. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I mean, I will totally tell you that's a screw up, on the part of the town, no doubt.
Now, there's no action for us to take on it, right?
I don't think so.
That's what
No,
my question is. What happens
So
now?
ultimately, we may need to do a year-end transfer for the departments or something like that to, because we're gonna end up with surplus in this area, right? So, but I don't think there's any action to take right now.
And a quick question, is there any way to make this right moving forward? Are we able, since we're 40,000, say we did want to go with our original thing, we can't save this and give it back to the town next year somehow?
We've
Or
already
do it
legally
right?
set our mill rate. I
Right,
think, yeah, so next year we would just, reduce the budget by 40,000 somewhere in theory.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we can do, right, is what I was just getting at, right? When we do ultimately take some action here, right, we're gonna probably end up transferring some surplus because it's not needed, right?
right.
Because of the spreadsheet error, and we can transfer that into into unexpended fund balance, and note that we're doing that, and then kind of have that. It gets a little tricky because, of course, once you put it in unexpended fund balance, it goes into a giant pool of money, but
Mhm.
depending on what we're doing in the budget next season, how we're working it up, are we drawing from fund balance at all? We
Right.
can try and do some kind of offset, such that before the taxpayers, receive a proposed budget from us, we've accounted for the issue.
Perfect. Thank you, Rob. Yeah, I just want to keep it in mind for next year. Perfect. Yep.
Do we need to communicate that to the town at all? Is there something in the charter that says if there's an error made that the town should be notified? Just
Nothing in
curious.
the charter.
Okay.
No, and
In a sense, we are through this meeting, I guess, I
Right.
don't think we need
It's
to
Yeah.
public.
make a formal announcement
Yeah.
of it somewhere. I mean, I think if it's
Okay.
one of these things that was a couple $100,000 or would have significant impact to the services provided to the town, it would probably be incumbent upon us to, make a bigger deal out of it maybe, but that's my take.
I mean, remember too, when you set a budget, we don't, for instance, know what our exemptions and abatements are. So that number
There's
has
always some float,
a
right?
fair, so in any given, trying to get a budget, and I'm not making light of the fact that we overtaxed the citizens $40,000. I have a problem with that too. I mean, I wish that hadn't happened. But in the grand scheme of things, there's so much uncertainty in a budget anyway. The likelihood of us hitting it within $40,000 is pretty small.
Yeah.
Frankly.
Yeah, I mean,
Which is not to excuse the fact that we screwed up the budget by $40,000, because we did.
Well, it's on a year where we increased spending so a huge amount. We did offset it because the RAM levy was lower and different things were lower. It's hard to take in a year where we increase the spending by a lot. But we can justify anything, and it is what it is at this point. I get it. And I like what Rob said, maybe when there's a surplus at the end of the year and it goes back into I certainly won't be voting for spending, I'll be thinking about the 40,000 in my head at the end of the year, but again, it is hard to ever formulate an exact budget, but
Yeah, but you don't want to have mistakes that can
Right.
be avoided, right? So,
yeah.
and
we
again,
just-
yeah, it's, it's like less than half a percent of our overall budget, doesn't really mean it's not important, but, it is.
It's the
important.
full picture. Yeah, I agree.
Going forward, we get the formulas correct, and
Yep.
I'm kind of surprised we missed this actually, because I think several of us kind of took a look at it, try to make sure that things are right, so. Okay, any other comments or questions on that?
Yeah, I'll be honest, we didn't pick it up until Cheryl put the budget into QuickBooks. And then we had a difference in the totals between QuickBooks and the budget. But we couldn't figure out what it was. And Cheryl was the one who finally found it. Because all the individual totals for the individual line matched up, but the bottom line dollar did not. Now, it was also offset by the fact that our final grand list, was definitely lower than, what the published grand list was. Because obviously when, there's 6 months between the start of the budget year and when tax bills go out. So there are changes to that. So that sucked up a portion of the difference anyway. But that doesn't mean we didn't screw up, and it did result in residents paying about 0.11 mils more than they probably should have been taxed.
Okay, well, I guess if nobody has anything else, we can move on to the next item, which is 5E, the MEIU contract. Eric, the notations in the packet indicate that this is a privileged communication. Does this mean we have to go into executive session and discussion, or are we just not going to talk specifics?
No, it doesn't. At this point, so what has happened is we sat down, we met with the union. This was a very easy union negotiation because the previous time, 4 years ago, we had set in place most of the changes on the town side we wanted to see in the contract. So this contract already pretty much had everything we wanted in it. The only things that were really up for debate is what the actual percentage increase year over year, whether that union would agree to give up the extra vacation day, so it matched the town personnel policy in the other union, and whether they would agree to an increase in their percentage share for healthcare. So that's kind of what we settled on between that. I brought it back to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen was in agreement with the outline of that document. And on that basis, and they authorized me to sign an MOU so that we could get the books set up correctly for this fiscal year and not have to do what we had to do with the other union, which is go back and try to figure it out later once we finally, because we'd already settled on what the conditions were going to be. So at this point, the only thing we're waiting on is final contract language to go back and forth between them and the board a few times to settle on exact verbiage, but the outline of the contract is set.
I just have
Okay.
one question.
Sure.
Eric, I just have one question. I know I sat in the negotiations the last time. Who was the management side of, representing the town? So are you saying you sat across the table from the union people and then you brought it back to the Board of Selectmen?
So
Yep.
the Board of Selectmen had the first selectman sit in on it. So
Okay,
it was Jeff McGuire and myself.
okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions on that? Okay, hearing none, I guess we'll move on. Remember, we did add an agenda item for new business for the schedule of, I'm not sure exactly what it's called, Eric, for the school transfers, levies.
Yeah, let me bring that up.
Yeah.
Sure. This is my problem. I got 18 different documents all open at once because I never know what you're going to ask. Okay.
Be on your toes.
Let me see.
So the adopted budget is that's the agreed on budget for the fiscal year. So in the past, the Board of Finance has never been willing to provide a month-by-month allocation based on what they think their expenditures are in any given month, which is what RAM does. RAM gives us a variable schedule because they have enough data to know how much money they need in, October and how much money they need in December. So what the previous request had been from the Board of Ed was just to divide it in 10 equal payments, start the payments in July, and pay them this much each month and up through April. And then by April, they would have gotten their entire allotment for the year. So I think that corresponds to what the Board of Education wants. And I told the town treasurer to go ahead and do that. And her comment to me was that she didn't feel that since we were talking about a third of the total town budget, that she or I should be doing that without the Board of Finance's approval. So what I'm asking you to do is to approve that as a levy schedule so we can pay them their first allotment in July. And I'm sorry we didn't bring this up at the last meeting. I think she said you talked about it, but nobody made any motion. So she didn't feel comfortable establishing a levy schedule on her own. So that would be my suggestion. You may choose a different levy schedule if you want, but again, I think the appropriate way to do it is just split it, and along with that, I think the first selectman is trying to work with the chair of Board of Ed to set up their own stiff account. So because there are times when the Board of Education has a pretty healthy,
Surplus, yeah.
$1.5 million or so in their accounts.
Make some good money on it.
No reason they shouldn't be making 5% interest on that money too. Where that gets tricky is a Board of Ed. A Board of Ed has a budget. So excess money, just like the town doesn't get to spend the money that we make in our stiff account, it automatically runs into the unexpended fund balance. Technically, that money should run into the unexpended fund balance on the town side, not on their side. My suggestion is that you make an agreement with the Board of Ed, but I guess if you all sign this agreement, it would happen anyway. But that money then be automatically designated to go into the capital, the AES, the 35
School road, yeah.
capital fund. I'm sorry, that just doesn't roll off the tongue.
No,
It doesn't. Eric, I apologize if you already walked us through this and I just didn't sink in. So how does this levy schedule differ from what we've done in the past? What did we do last year? What did we do the year before? How did it work?
You did basically the same thing. All I'm asking you to do is just do the same thing you did last year.
You want us to bless it? Okay.
Right. The treasurer's just not comfortable making payments without some sort of schedule by the Board of Finance on how that should be established.
Yeah, and we could probably separately, just from this particular action, we should probably consider establishing a policy of levy payments that's, that is, convenable to the, Board of Ed, that, just follows the schedule so there is no confusion in the future. Anyway, does anybody want to make a motion that we follow this levy schedule?
I'll make the motion that we follow the schedule as presented, the levy schedule as presented.
I'll second it.
Okay, is there further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you, everybody. Okay,
Okay, I will inform them and make that happen.
thank you.
Great.
Then the next agenda item is item 6, which is approval of the meeting minutes. I looked at the minutes from the last meeting. It looks like we didn't approve the May meeting minutes, that was carried forward, but they're not in the packet. So I don't know if we want to vote on those
Were
also.
I feel like we were missing them. I think
Yeah,
there's
they
a
weren't in the
reason we didn't
packet.
pass it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're
Okay.
missing them again.
They probably don't technically need to be there, but I think it would be better if they are there to make sure everyone's had a chance to review them. So
Mhm.
maybe we didn't change the budget, or the agenda for that, but anyway. So we do have this before us. Would anybody like to make a motion regarding these meeting minutes?
I move we approve the minutes.
Second?
I'll second it.
Hey, Joanne, thank you. Got you. Any discussion? Okay, call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'm going to abstain because I was not there at the meeting.
I abstain as well.
You're abstaining also, Bill? Okay, so motion passes 5-2. I'm sorry, 4-2. Kim is not here. I don't know if you saw her email, but she wasn't feeling well. She sent that a few minutes before the meeting started.
Oh, good. I
I had missed
missed that.
that, so.
I mean, not that she's not feeling
I
well.
saw it right when I
Yeah.
was logging in, yeah.
Yeah,
I
me
was
She
too.
sent
surprised
it
she wasn't-
minutes before the meeting started.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, agenda item 7 is administrator's report. Do you have anything we haven't already discussed? Eric?
Let me just check through my notes. I wanted to talk about the AES levy schedule. We talked about the transfers. We talked about the rec trails grant. I want to once again reiterate that we're having the grand opening for the community center on August 10th at 4 p.m. Just so that you know, on average, since the founding of the town of Andover, we've only built a building about every 25 years. So, hopefully I'll be dead by the time we build the next one. So you might as well come celebrate.
Good, hopefully.
And on a good note, Karma, our insurance company, was made a profit overall this last year, enough that they're returning money again this year to the members. We're not getting as much as we got the year before, but they're returning $2,106, and they're going to give us the check August 1st. So we get a few extra dollars, which is good because what we didn't budget for in our insurance was the fact that we are adding a new building in the town. So we're about to add about $1 million in capital assets to our insurance policy, which I don't think will cost us $2,000. So those two should be a wash. So we're happy there. So again, August 1st, there will be a public meeting to hopefully approve the town match for the rec trails grant. And that's pretty much all I have related to me.
Any questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to liaison reports. Does anybody have a liaison report? CIP,
It was
other,
canceled this month. There wasn't anything to bring up, so.
okay, we'll move on to correspondence. I did forward one thing that I got from Cheryl that I don't think she copied the entire board on. That was just it was a report from the state about the transactions from the state. I barely opened it up, took a look at it. So you have that in your inbox. It's just for review only, no action needed, I think, on that. Okay, I don't think I had any other correspondence, or you guys already had it, or I forwarded if I had it. That looks like that. If nobody has anything else, move on to public speak. Looks like we still have Shannon and Linda. I commend you both for hanging in there. Does anybody have anything to add? Linda?
Nope, I've spoken enough. Thanks very much.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
okay, thank you. Okay, our last agenda item is adjournment. Would anybody like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
I'll
Hey,
second
Is that Bill seconding?
it. Yes.
Okay, I'm sure we'll have some discussion on this. No, no controversy? Anyone? Okay, all in favor of adjournment? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No abstentions? All right, thank you very much, everybody. Maybe we'll.